The mandible or lower jaw is the largest and strongest bone of the face. It articulates with the skull at the temporomandibular joint. The mandible consists of a body and a pair of rami. The body of the mandible meets the ramus on each side at the angle of the mandible. On its external surface in the midline, the body of the mandible has a ridge called Symphysis menti. The mental foramen can be seen below the second premolar tooth. It transmits the terminal branches of the inferior alveolar nerve and vessels. On the medial surface of the body of the mandible, in the median plane, are seen the mental spines. These give origin to the genia glossus muscle above and the genia hyoid muscles below. The mylohyoid line can be seen as an oblique ridge that runs backward and laterally from the area of the mental spines to an area below and behind the third molar tooth. The submandibular fossa, for the superficial part of the submandibular salivary gland, lies below the posterior part of the mylohyoid line. The sublingual fossa, for the sublingual gland, lies above the anterior part of the mylohyoid line, here. The upper border of the body of the mandible is called the alveolar part. In the adult, it contains 16 sockets for the roots of the teeth. The lower border of the body of the mandible is called the base. The digastric fossa is a small depression on the base on either side of the symphysis menti. Here the anterior bellies of the digastric muscles are attached. The ramus of the mandible is vertically placed and has an anterior carnoid process and a posterior condyloid process or head. The two processes are separated by the mandibular notch. On the lateral surface of the ramus are markings for the attachment of the masseter muscle. On the medial surface is the mandibular foramen for the inferior alveolar nerve and vessels. In front of the foramen is a projection of bone called the linguala for the attachment of the sphenomandibular ligament. The foramen leads into the mandibular canal, which opens on the lateral surface of the body of the mandible at the mental foramen, here. The carnoid process receives on its medial surface the attachment of the temporalis muscle. Below the condyloid process or head is a short neck. The mandible is horseshoe-shaped and forms part of a bony ring with two temporomandibular joints and the base of the skull. Traumatic impact is transmitted around the ring, causing a single fracture or multiple fractures of the mandible, often far removed from the point of impact.